The moment my uncle walked into that conference room and wouldn't look me in the eye, I knew. I didn't need the documents, I didn't need the timestamps, I didn't need the attorney's careful, measured voice explaining what he had found. I already knew, because my uncle had never once in 30 years failed to meet my gaze, not when he told me my parents were gone, not when he sat across from me at every school play and every graduation, not when he handed me my first car keys with shaking hands and a proud smile. He always looked at me. Until today. And the only thing standing between us was his wife. Before I tell you what my aunt did, the moment she thought I wasn't paying attention, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. My name is Nadia. I am 28 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for an insurance litigation firm, which means I spend my days finding the exact moment a number stopped being honest. I am not dramatic. I am not reactive. I was trained by a woman who once told me that panic is what happens when you confuse urgency with evidence. She was right. So when my grandfather's estate attorney called me on a Tuesday morning in March and asked if I had recently opened a joint savings account with my Aunt Carla, I did not panic. I pulled out a notepad, asked him to repeat every detail twice, and wrote it all down in the careful, unhurried handwriting my grandfather himself had taught me. No, I told him, I have not. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The careful, kind. My grandfather, Walter, had passed 6 weeks earlier. He was 81, sharp until the end, and deeply specific about his wishes. He had updated his will 3 years prior, after my Aunt Carla married my Uncle Raymond, and moved into the house on Birchwood Drive. I knew this because I had been there the afternoon he came home from the attorney's office. He sat down at the kitchen table, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and told me plainly. The house goes to you. The investment account goes to you, and Raymond gets the cabin, and the truck. He said it the way he said everything, without drama, without ceremony, just the facts arranged in their proper order. I told him he didn't need to explain himself. He said he wasn't explaining. He was informing. My grandfather had worked for 38 years as a civil engineer. He believed in documentation the way other men believed in God. He kept every receipt, every contract, every letter, in a fireproof cabinet in his study. He had taught me to do the same. So after he passed, when my uncle called to tell me the estate was being processed and I should expect to hear from the attorney within the month, I wasn't worried. The paperwork was airtight. Walter had seen to that personally. Which is why the attorney's question about the joint account sat so strangely in my chest. That evening, I logged into the financial records portal that had been set up for the estate. It was a standard probate management system, the kind that tracks asset transfers, beneficiary, designations, and correspondence. I scrolled through the activity log the way I scroll through any document, looking not at what was there, but at what had changed. And there, buried in a file labeled Administrative Updates, was a digitally signed amendment to the beneficiary designation on my grandfather's primary investment account. It was dated 11 days after his death. It redirected the account, valued at just over $210,000, to a newly created joint account held by myself and Carla Marie Holt Davies. My aunt's full legal name. I didn't scream. I didn't call my uncle. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and began to document. There's something you should understand about the way my aunt arrived in our lives. My Uncle Raymond had been a bachelor for most of his adult years, a little scattered. Devoted to his garden and his vinyl record collection. He met Carla at a church fundraiser when he was 62, and she was 55. She was polished in a way that always read to me as rehearsed. Her compliments landed a half-second too late. Her interest in other people's stories seemed to peak whenever money was mentioned. But Raymond loved her with the uncritical joy of a man who had simply been lonely for too long, and my grandfather, who noticed everything, had never said a word against her directly. He had just made sure his documents were in order. I remembered the first time I truly understood what Carla was. I was 19. My grandfather was hosting Sunday dinner, and Carla had come for the second time. Still new enough to be on her best behavior. She had helped clear the plates, and I had followed her into the kitchen to bring in the coffee. She didn't know I was behind her. She was standing at the sink, looking out the window at the backyard, at the vegetable garden my grandfather had kept for 40 years, at the old oak tree my father had climbed as a boy. And she said, almost to herself, her voice perfectly even, "Property like this doesn't stay valuable unless somebody manages it properly. Raymond certainly can't do it alone." She turned and saw me then, and smiled the way people smile when they've been caught thinking out loud, and decided the best response is confidence. "My grandfather's going to need a plan eventually," she said, picking up the coffee tray. "For everyone's sake." I was 19, and I had just lost both parents 4 years earlier. I knew what that sentence meant. I had just never thought someone would say it out loud in my grandfather's kitchen while his coffee was still brewing. I thought about that moment as I stared at the beneficiary amendment on my screen. She had been patient. I had to give her that. I pulled the document metadata first. Every digital file carries a signature that most people ignore, a record of when it was created, when it was last modified, and from which device. The amendment had been uploaded to the estate portal from an IP address I didn't recognize. I ran it through a reverse lookup. It traced to a residential address in the same zip code as my uncle's house, but not the house itself. A neighbor, possibly. Or someone using a mobile hotspot to obscure the origin. Then I found the signature block. Electronic signatures in legal documents are not just images of handwriting. They are authenticated through a signing platform that creates a detailed certificate, a chain of custody showing exactly when the link was sent, when it was opened, and from which device and location the signature was applied. I had worked with these certificates dozens of times in fraud cases. I knew what to look for. The certificate showed that the signature link had been sent to my email address. It had been opened 47 seconds later. The signature had been applied from a device running a browser I hadn't used in 3 years, connected to a network I had never been on. And the timestamp on the signature itself was a Sunday afternoon in February, the same Sunday afternoon I had documented receipts to prove I was 300 miles away, attending a deposition prep session for a case in Nashville. My aunt had not just forged a signature. She had done it sloppily, from her own home network, on a device that almost certainly still had her browsing history on it, at a time I could disprove with a time-stamped hotel receipt and a signed attendance sheet. She thought I was a grieving granddaughter. She forgot I was a forensic accountant. I created a new folder on my desktop. I did not name it Family Matters. I named it Estate Fraud Walter Davies. I began to move files into it with the same quiet efficiency I bring to every case that lands on my desk. The metadata report. The IP lookup. The signing certificate. My own travel records from that Sunday. The original will, scanned and dated in my grandfather's careful engineer's handwriting. And the audio recording of the attorney's call, which I had captured legally, as a one-party consent state from the moment he first asked about the joint account. My phone lit up. It was my Uncle Raymond. He let it ring. Not because I was angry with him. I let it ring because I wasn't ready, and because I knew that Raymond, despite everything, would tell Carla I had called. He always did. He had never learned the particular discipline of keeping a conversation private from his wife, because he had never had a reason to. He trusted her the way you trust someone you chose in the last season of your loneliness, completely. Without audit, without question. And that trust was the most dangerous variable in everything I was about to do. I called the estate attorney back the next morning. His name was Mr. Calloway. And he had handled my grandfather's affairs for over a decade. He was not surprised to hear from me. He told me, carefully, that he had flagged the amendment because the signature behavior had seemed irregular to his document management system. It had triggered an automated review, notice that he had almost dismissed as a software glitch. Almost. He was glad he had called me first. I asked him 3 questions. Whether the amendment had been executed, meaning whether any funds had moved. He said no, the system had frozen the transfer pending beneficiary confirmation. Whether Carla had contacted him directly about the account. He paused. Then said yes. Twice in the past week. Asking about the timeline for fund disbursement. And whether he would be willing to schedule a closing meeting for the estate distribution, with all parties present, to finalize the transfer of assets. Another pause. Longer this time. I can arrange that, he said. Will you be needing anything specific from me at that meeting? I asked him to print the signing certificate. I asked him to pull the original beneficiary designation. The one my grandfather had signed in person. With 2 witnesses. 4 years prior. And I asked him to run the meeting exactly as he normally would, standard estate closing procedure, nothing unusual. He understood. He had been doing this for a long time. 3 days later, my uncle called again. I answered this time. He sounded tired in the specific way. He always sounded tired when Carla had been managing something, a low, worn-out exhaustion, like a man who had been paddling upstream, and had finally just agreed to go with the current. He told me Calloway had scheduled the estate closing for Friday. He told me it was going to be straightforward, just signatures on the distribution documents, and that Carla had been so helpful navigating all the paperwork, he didn't know what he would have done without her. He said it the way people say things they've been coached to say smoothly, with just enough warmth to deflect questions. I'll be there, I said. He exhaled. Good, sweetheart. That means a lot. Carla's really been working so hard to get everything settled for the family. I said I was sure she had. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. My grandfather had taught me to play chess when I was 7 years old. He was not sentimental about it. He told me the board does not care about your feelings. It only cares about position. Position is everything. You do not move to respond. You move to create the conditions under which your opponent has no good options. I had not beaten him until I was 16, and he had shaken my hand across the board, like I was a colleague, not a grandchild. I thought about that handshake for a long time sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday night. I thought about Carla. Confident and calculating. Eating through my grandfather's legacy like it was simply a transaction she had earned the right to complete. I thought about my Uncle Raymond, sitting next to her in some version of that conference room, looking at the floor. I thought about a Sunday afternoon in my grandfather's kitchen, a woman with a coffee tray and cold arithmetic in her eyes, already calculating what would eventually be hers. I opened my laptop and booked a flight home for Thursday night. The estate attorney's office was in a low brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old carpet and institutional calm. There were framed prints of local landscapes on the walls and a receptionist who offered water in small paper cups. My uncle and Carla were already there when I arrived. Raymond stood when he saw me and crossed the room quickly, hugging me with both arms the way he always had, long and tight, the hug of someone who understood what it meant to lose people. I held on for a moment longer than usual. Carla was seated at the conference table. She was wearing a dark blazer and a strand of pearls I had never seen before. And she was holding a leather portfolio that looked recently purchased. She smiled at me with everything except her eyes. So glad you could make it, Nadia. I know the drive is long. I flew, I said. Something shifted in her face. Just briefly. She hadn't expected me to come from that far. She had expected a granddaughter showing up to sign documents, not a forensic accountant who had been building a case file for a week. Mr. Calloway came in and settled at the head of the table. He was in his 60s, unhurried, with reading glasses on a chain, and the careful neutrality of a man who had seen every version of family dysfunction that money could produce. He thanked us all for coming. He said the estate closing would follow standard procedure, distribution of assets per the governing will, signature on the deed transfer for the Birchwood property, and finalization of the investment account beneficiary. He opened the portfolio in front of him and looked at Carla first. We do have one administrative matter to address before we proceed, he said. There was a beneficiary amendment submitted to the estate portal approximately 2 weeks ago. He slid a printed copy toward her. I need to verify this is an authorized document before we can continue. Carla reached for it without hesitation. She glanced at it. Yes, she said. That's the updated designation. Nadia and I set that up together. She wanted to make sure the account transferred smoothly without going through probate delays. It was her idea, actually. She said it looking directly at me. Smooth. Confident. Preemptive. Mr. Calloway looked at me. He kept his expression neutral because he is a professional and he had been briefed. Nadia, he said. Can you confirm you authorized this amendment? I opened my bag. The sound of the folder landing on the conference table was not loud. But in that quiet, carpeted room, it had a particular finality. I didn't authorize it, I said. And I kept my voice even. Because this was not a moment for anger. Anger is noise. This was a moment for precision. I slid the folder toward Mr. Calloway. This is a forensic analysis of the document's signing certificate. The signature attributed to me was executed from a device and network location I have never used. The timestamp corresponds to a date when I was in Nashville. My hotel receipt, a timestamped rideshare record, and a signed deposition prep attendance sheet are all included. Raymond made a sound. Not words. Just a sound. There's also an IP lookup on page 4, I continued. The device that opened the signature link traces to a residential network in the Birchwood area, not my grandfather's address. A nearby one. I looked at Carla then. I hadn't looked at her until that moment. If you pull the browser history on whatever device was used, you'll find the session. Carla's mouth opened. She started to say something about misunderstandings, about digital signatures being confusing, about how she had simply tried to help manage the process because Raymond was overwhelmed and she was only trying to do what was best for the family. Her voice climbed as she talked, gaining the pitch of someone who believes volume is a substitute for evidence. Mr. Calloway held up one hand. He looked at the folder. He turned to the signing certificate. He looked at it for a long moment with the careful attention of a man who has made a career out of reading documents honestly. Then he closed it. This amendment cannot be executed, he said. The authentication chain is compromised. I am obligated under state bar guidelines to flag this for the probate court and to notify the financial institution holding the account. He looked at Carla with the particular flatness of a man choosing his words with legal precision. I am also obligated to advise all parties that submitting a fraudulent beneficiary amendment to an estate in probate is a felony under the state's code. Raymond finally looked up. He looked at Carla. He looked at her the way you look at a landscape after the fog has cleared slowly, with the dawning comprehension that the terrain is nothing like what you imagined. Carla pushed back from the table. She said this was outrageous. She said I had always had it out for her. She said my grandfather had wanted her to be taken care of, that he had told her as much, that no one in this family had ever appreciated how much she had sacrificed. She picked up her portfolio. She was going to call her own attorney. Mr. Calloway reminded her, politely, and without inflection, that she had signed into this meeting and been present for the disclosure of a fraudulent document bearing her IP address, which was now part of the official estate record. She left anyway. The door didn't slam, she closed it carefully, which somehow felt worse. Raymond sat very still. I didn't speak. I had learned that from my grandfather too, that some moments don't need to be filled with words. Some moments need to be given their proper weight without commentary. After a long time, Raymond said, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. And I meant it. Raymond is not a calculating man. He is a trusting one, which is not the same thing. His failure was not malice. It was the particular blindness of someone who had decided that love required him to stop seeing clearly. That was its own kind of damage. But it was not the same crime. Mr. Calloway formally distributed the estate per the original will that afternoon. The Birchwood house transferred to me. The investment account beneficiary was confirmed as my name alone. Raymond received the cabin and the truck, which had been his and which he had never sought to alter. As we were leaving, Raymond stopped at the door. He looked older than he had that morning. He said he was sorry. I told him I knew. I told him I didn't need anything from him right now except time. He nodded. He looked like a man who understood, finally, and without defense, that he had let someone use his silence as a weapon, and that the cost of that silence was going to be paid by everyone in the room. I drove to my grandfather's house that evening. It was empty in the way that houses become empty after the person who made them a home is gone, the furniture in the same places, the smell of him still faintly in the rooms. But all of it strangely still, like a held breath. I sat at the kitchen table where he had poured his bourbon and informed me, not explained to me, how things were going to go. I put my hand flat on the surface. The wood was old and solid and honest. Carla was formally referred to the probate court the following week. The financial institution flagged the account activity under their fraud protocols. Her own attorney, the one she had presumably called from the parking lot, was not, I suspected, going to find much to work with given that her IP address had been logged at the time of signing and the original will had 2 witnesses and a notary stamp from 4 years prior. Raymond filed for separation 3 weeks later. He called to tell me himself, in the same quiet, direct way he had told me everything important in my life. He didn't ask me to feel sorry for him. He just told me, and then he told me he was going to spend some time at the cabin and that he'd leave the light on if I ever wanted to come up. I told him I'd bring coffee. He said to make it strong. My grandfather had a saying he used to repeat whenever I complained that a situation was unfair. He'd look at me over the top of his reading glasses and say, "Fair doesn't come from wishing, kid. Fair comes from documentation." I had rolled my eyes at it for most of my childhood. It had taken me 28 years, and 1 forensic audit of my own inheritance to understand that he had not been speaking abstractly. He had been giving me a tool. I still have the folder on my desktop. I haven't deleted it. I don't think I will for a while. Not because I need it anymore, but because some things are worth keeping exactly as they are, clean, organized, and irrefutably true. My grandfather's house is mine now. The floors creak in the same places. The oak tree in the backyard is starting to bud. I haven't decided yet whether to move in or rent it or simply hold it for a while. The way you hold certain things that are too meaningful to rush. What I know is that it belongs to me because he decided it would. And no amount of quiet calculation, no amended document, no forged signature on a Sunday afternoon could change what he had already put in writing. The paperwork was airtight. Walter had seen to that personally. And so, it turned out. Had I. If you've ever had to protect something someone loved you enough to leave behind, leave a heart below. And if you want to know what happened when Carla's attorney reviewed the evidence, subscribe. Because this story has one more chapter, and the number she owed is not a small one.